We're going to start with landing mechanics. And you might be thinking landing is just a result of jumping up and then waiting for the floor to hit. But here's where we see kind of a disconnect in some of the training that you might have been used to right now. We are going to start from the end, and we're going to kind of Tarantino it. If you're familiar with like the Kill Bill series, they usually show the end first, and then they kind of reverse engineer all the way up into the point of the finale of the movie. Landing obviously is the last element of the jump that we think about because it is, again, our body coming back into contact with the floor. Here's where a lot of the issues happen, guys. This is where a lot of the longevity issues happen, where knee injuries. So we're going to talk a little bit about the safety protocol for landing mechanics to ensure your career is longer and just a bit more efficient in general. Number one, and again, you should have your PDF download from above. If you can follow along, if that makes it a little bit easier. Also, feel free to stop and kind of rewind this video if you get lost. Again, I'm going to do my best to teach you just like you're one of my athletes, because you are. Loading the hips. Landing is taught oftentimes, at least by me, the similar way to that of a squat. So the concept of a squat is we want to load the large muscles and the large movers of our lower body. So that's our glutes, hamstrings, quads, without overloading those stability joints such as the knees. So we talk a little bit about loading the hips. And the way this looks a little bit different here is the concept of having, so let's look at this in terms of this is a person, okay? So this would then be our hips, where that hinge is. So this is the concept of loading the hinge or pushing the hips back to absorb a little bit more of that impact versus the knees shearing forward and taking the brunt of the force on impact. I see this a lot. I see this a lot with a lot of athletes that aren't necessarily connected to their movement, and this is what we need to do. Understanding that oftentimes we need to slow down in order to speed up, and you might hear me say that a lot throughout the jump guide. So loading the hips becomes number one, and we do this by patterning, again, the squat first and foremost. So not only are we looking to load the hips, but we're looking to create torque in the hips, which improve our stability. We utilize torque by creating what's called external rotation or outward rotation from the hips. I'm going to try to be inserting some clips in here so you can see the concept of screwing our feet into the floor. Oftentimes we'll give our hips a little bit more of that torque. So if we have a set of legs that come down in the front, and these are our feet, these are our knees, and then this is kind of our hip region here. At these hip joints, we want to be creating rotation to the outside by screwing our feet into the floor. I'm not much of an artist, I'm not going to lie to you guys, but the concept here plays true when it comes to squatting and it comes to the landing elements and mechanics with that. Perfect practice. Landing can oftentimes be the one thing that I have the hardest time with my athletes getting into a program, and it's because who wants to sit there and learn to land over and over and over again? This is where, as a coach, if you're watching this, it becomes imperative that you stress how crucial it is, like I'd mentioned before, that sometimes we need to backpedal a little bit in order to speed up down the road. Someone looking to change their jump or affect their jump by coming in and simply jumping over and over and over again, we're going to re-ingrain a lot of the issues they have throughout their jump. So what we do is we segment it and we break it down. So perfect practice through this landing of loading the hips can be incorporated into warm-up drills, which I'll make sure to give you some drills for that. And it can also be incorporated into the programming of workouts itself. So whether it's doing some sort of drop jump or doing some jumps with focus on the landing. So anytime we do plyometrics here at Project Pure Athlete, what I drill away is no matter what we're doing, we're aiming for that efficient landing mechanic. Perfect practice ensures that in a game situation, our body will default to a strong point of reference. So if we never pay attention to the landing elements and we just come down as a result of gravity, what will happen is you should be fine over a course of time, but when we get to those later stages, mid to later stages of our athletic careers, when we start seeing issues in ankles and knees because of improper loading techniques. So perfect practice makes patterns sharper over time and also creates a little bit more of a direct path to a more efficient default position. So that's perfect practice. I mean, that's just pretty much plain and simple, guys. Like, you have to practice and pattern things over and over and over again to ensure that you're getting the most out of that workout, most out of that skill. And this is what landing is. Landing is a skill. Some of the best leapers in the world are also some of the best landers in the world. Landers is not really much of a word that I use often, but you know what I'm trying to say. This applies to broad base across most sports. The only thing that's going to differ is if you're looking at track and field landings, long jump, triple jump, high jump. Obviously those require landing slightly different, but mechanical principles of landing on your feet will follow the load the hip strategy, creating torque, and also making sure we pattern perfectly to ensure that proper default position. So 2 versus 1, if you follow along on the PDF, what you'll see here is this is the concept of landing on 2 feet versus landing on 1 foot. Landing on 1 foot is a part of a dynamic shifting sport environment. So it's inevitable that at some point you're going to be landing on a single leg. But by landing on a single leg, we can still employ those same tactics of loading the hips. So we do practice the concept of landing on 1 foot in training, so that athletes are aware not only of how to absorb landing, but their body control and their proprioceptive abilities, which is basically just our body's orientation to things around us in any different type of setting. So let's think volleyball. We go up for an attack in volleyball, although we would ultimately love to have a crisp, clean swing and land properly on 2 feet. We're dealing with a lot of different elements, right? We're dealing with forward momentum from the jump. We're dealing with a blocker on the other end that could be moving, requiring us to shift shoulders and hips, which will impact the way we land. So patterning not only that double leg landing, but also that single leg variation will ensure that if we do have to land on 1 foot, we're more likely to default to loading of the hip. Now, it's not gonna happen all the time. This is trying to create default patterning. So don't get caught up with, Tyler, like it's not likely that I'm ever gonna be able to have control of this. We have to practice it to ingrain those pathways so that our body becomes responsive in quick shifting scenarios. Lastly, we're going to touch on the elements of breathing and bracing. And you guys can't see it, I'm not going to necessarily show you, but my dog is dead on the floor behind us and he is panting and breathing. And that just reminded me that we need to touch on this subject here. Landing requires stability not only through the joints, but also through our midline. And elements that will impact the way in which we recover ourselves from a jump are our abilities to create intra-abdominal pressure, and that is done through breathing and bracing techniques. So when I teach a new athlete to land, if we're landing from different heights, what we do is we focus on inhaling and creating a deep belly breath, and then holding our breath just slightly, but again, still enough that we can breathe comfortably in behind that brace. What this will do is put diaphragm, pelvic floor, all the intra-abdominal musculature in a very advantageous position to absorb the impact of landing. Because the injuries don't happen during the jump, they happen during the landing. That's that repetitive, and the amount of force that acts on our body it's incredible. So we need to take the time to pattern this, not only landing mechanics, but the breathing and bracing required for that as well. So learning how to breathe into the belly, and there's great literature on this online, and I'm not going to sit here and give you a lesson on belly breathing, but what I will do is implore you to take some of your own time to go and research the concepts of belly breathing and taking that breathing out of that shallow chest region, because the implication it has across the board, not only to jumping, but to just general strength conditioning and athletic training in general, it's immense. So take that time to do that. Bracing here, midline wise, bracing through the hips is going to come down to our ability to control and time our breathing appropriately to the part of the jump we're actually eliciting. So if we are jumping, oftentimes exerting some energy or expelling air out on a jump will create some additional power output. If you guys are familiar with throwers in the Olympics, shot put, discus, javelin, oftentimes you hear that one huge effort is followed by a large scream. That scream is an output or a release of breath from their body, and oftentimes increases power output by a fair degree. So learning how to optimize our breathing is also going to play a huge role in leaving the floor with more energy and then receiving ourselves from the air in a better powerful position. So there'll be some drills, and what I'll do is the nature of these videos will be some tutorial, a little bit of talking and teaching, and then at the end what I'll do is I'll layer over a couple different drills that you can implement to help the varying parts of our jumping principles. So you've made it through part one, which is landing mechanics. Again, going over this really quickly, the concept of loading the hips is simply stated as similar to that of a squat. So practicing your body weight squat more frequently, where we lower ourselves hip first by releasing back and sitting down into a powerful position, will serve you very well when it comes to jumping. So there's a great crossover between just smart strength conditioning and proper landing mechanics. Practice, 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 practice. I can't say this enough. Practice. Take time to slow down and do the small pieces that people skip over, and that will be the thing that sets you apart from your competition. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. 2 versus 1. Practice both 2-leg and 1-leg landings. I urge you to err on the side of starting from a very low height when it comes to practicing landing mechanics, and or from a hop that you create from the ground. You know, jumping up onto a really high box because you've seen someone else do this, we want to err and kind of caution away from that. That's the one thing that I think people oftentimes get lost into is, I want to be like this person, so I'm going to do exactly what they're doing. Problem is that when we look at the elite of the elite, we don't see the work they've done behind the scenes to get them where they are. What I'm trying to do is bring you that work, and oftentimes maybe work that they haven't even done, that hopefully puts you in a position to be even better than them when you get to their age and their level. Finally, breathing and bracing. Working on that belly breathing. We'll put a little link below to it, something that you can look at on belly breathing. This technique you can also utilize. So one of the exercises we use on a daily basis to reinforce bracing and intra-abdominal pressure is simply a dead bug. A dead bug is a very common practice principle for creating intra-abdominal pressure and also creating neutral spinal position. So we'll put some footage in here as well of that dead bug, and I recommend that everybody does this. Even if you're starting now and you haven't done dead bug very often, every single day, accumulate 2 minutes worth of holds on dead bug for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and you will see that correlation and crossover into just general strength and stability across the board. That's it, guys. That's number 1. If you have the time and you want to keep going, scroll down. Let's get to video number 2. We'll see you there.